There's kind of no way to make a video review without spoiling the game, so I'm just going to totally lean into it and tell you there will be heavy spoilers in this video, up to and including the ending. But I also don't think the story is very good, so, you know, you're not risking a whole lot. I think DmC is a frustrating game to talk about, because it's neither good enough to force crow down people's throats, nor bad enough to spike a proverbial touchdown for the haters for right side. It's just sort of there.
My personal view on the terrorists is that they are disgusting, degrading, ghastly, sleazy, prurient, and generally nauseating.
It does some things right and some things wrong, so let's start with what it does right. The art in the game is actually fantastic. While I always admire the effort Ninja Theory went through to make their games look nice, the results never really clicked with me. This is not true with DmC, as each new level is visually distinct and pleasant to look at. I think I finally get why some people really find Ninja Theory to be creative. It is visually striking at a first glance, which is actually more than I can say for previous Devil May Cry games. It gets the world out into something beyond gothic castles and ancient ruins, and the occasional maniacal and mechanical laboratory, into something fresh. It no longer feels like just a Castlevania homage. I also think the presentation in general, including the acting and the cutscenes, is pretty damn great. Ninja Theory took some interesting ideas with the cutscenes, my favorite being this scene between Virgil and Dante, where the subject of conversation is represented by street art that no one calls attention to.
Sparta armed his sons. The rebellion for Dante. The Yamato for Virgil.
The problem is that these performances and good ideas are really blunted by the writing. I have been racking my brain trying to figure out why this game is getting praised for its writing, and I assume that it's just a comparison to previous Devil May Cry games. But the problem is that the writing isn't such a leap over the past few games that it makes up for how juvenile and truncated everything is.
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Then there's all the times where things just happen.
It's working. You can fight him now.
Was that Molotov magic? Maybe. But all you know is he just got hit in the face and he's now weak to swords. Some guy gets shot and I have no idea who the hell he is or why I should care. Characters change personality at the drop of a hat and betray their core convictions after minute-long conversations. This assumes the characters even have personality in the first place. The Bob Barmus fight could have been cool, but you fight him the second you meet him. All his dialogue is about Dante, then he dies and gives you an angel weapon for some reason. The game is about Dante joining Anonymous to take down the head of Goldman Sachs. In the middle, an episode of Futurama happens, and you kill Bill O'Reilly, and at some point there's doggy-style sex. But it somehow manages to not write any of this to any degree of interest. The points are just plopped out, and then never really discussed or talked about again. Virgil just sort of decides he's going to take over the world at the end, with a cliche, humans, bullshit line, and then leaves. The story even frequently has bad effects on the gameplay, forcing you into long sections where you're just walking with people. Then there's the weird pop culture references that pop up here and there, giving the game a shelf life of already too old to be relevant. And also there's this part where Twitter hashtags become oddly important, and one of the people tweeting is Ninja Theory's creative director. It's maddening, because I'm sure they can do better, they just don't. Maybe they felt it was unnecessary because of the series' previous pedigree with story. But if that's the argument you're going to use, then why does this game need to exist at all? The gameplay is really the heart of this game, so let's talk about that. It is serviceable, bordering on good, but again I have to question if that's actually good enough. The level design is almost non-existent. There's hallways, arenas, floating platforms, more hallways, more arenas, more floating platforms, even more floating platforms, and then even more floating platforms. 70% of this game is just being funneled down floating platforms. They have different skins, sure, but they sure as hell don't pass a silhouette test. I have nothing against hallways. Great games have had hallways. But putting enemies there in areas with low ceilings where you're encouraged to constantly lift them up in the air is crazy. The series used to use arenas to force you to move about. DmC employs its level design to strangle its core mechanics. It also feels like the game is just hostile to exploration, part of which I'll get into later. You can see here that DmC 1 encourages exploration, or, at the very least, has rooms designed to move around in. This may be better than DmC 4's odd decision to go backwards through the entire game. They're both just different kinds of bad. I'm willing to give DmC 4 the edge for simply having more to explore with less bonus room padding. And man, does this game feel padded. To access bonus rooms, you have to find keys and similarly categorized doors to use the keys on. Sometimes things are hidden behind doors you need special weapons to get through. Here you can see how I use the first angel weapon, the scythe, to get through this door. But early on, you also see these doors that look exactly the same, but can't be hit the same way. You can only use your second angel weapon, but you have no idea you're ever going to get that the first time you see that door. That's amateur design. I'm exploring now and I have no idea if I have the right tools or just haven't figured it out yet. Your game should never leave the player feeling stupid because you didn't design it right. Combat is the big thing here, and I feel like DmC, while playing better than titles like God of War, does not really live up to the series' reputation, much less standouts like Bayonetta. First of all, I'll point out a fundamental issue here. See this? When an enemy is not on camera, they do not attack you. So if you just want to pull one enemy away and do fun camera tricks to win, it's surprisingly easy. If you tried this camera thing in, say, Bayonetta, it would not work very well. DmC tries to be a crowd control game, a difference from the previous games, and that's fine. But it doesn't do it well. The other problem is the color-coded enemies. Certain enemies can only be hurt by certain weapons or in certain places. Maybe they wanted to encourage the player to employ more variety, but it seems inherently limiting and makes me feel like they're closing off my choices as they're expanding my repertoire. There's also the issue where the lack of lock-on results in having a hard time actually aiming my moves. In a game where yanking enemies is rather important, I feel like saying it works out most of the time shouldn't really be something to be proud of. The bosses are all just really bad mechanically. Some are visually arresting, but pale in comparison to what other action games offer. You don't need a strong grasp of the mechanics of the game to win, you just need to not be distracted by bright lights. I will say that the Bob Barvis fight has a cool moment where you're taken to a newsfeed of Dante fighting demons, and is honestly rather novel, but then it does it again.
At the Bellevue Pier recently. So what do we know about this Dante? Several people have now come
He said he was gonna kill her anyway. And then he did.
And it's less novel. And it's less novel the second time is actually a pretty good summary of the bosses. Perhaps the strangest being the penultimate boss and overall villain, Mundus, is almost identical in mechanics to the first boss, the Succubus. Bosses also have unskippable scenes in them that really bog down replaying them for fun. People say I shouldn't compare this game to Bayonetta and Devil May Cry 4 because of course Ninja Theory didn't make a better action game than some of the industry's best. To that I say, Bayonetta is years old. DmC 4 and Ninja Gaiden 2 are even older. If Ninja Theory really wanted to see what the industry's best were doing, it's right there. They can see it. It's available at any video game store. DmC just feels like nothing. Not the world's worst failure, but far from a success. Maybe the next one will be better, maybe it won't, but if you're gonna try this one, at least get it on PC. It's basically the only place to actually play this game.
Poor mother. I don't know my mother, but if you're calling me a son of a bitch, you wouldn't be the first!